We all want to be on those exhilarating teams. You know, the ones where you jump into an in-person meeting or a Zoom call and the ideas just fly. The ones where you know everyone on the team has your back. The ones where you leave the workday with more energy than when you started. Maybe you've been on a team like that, but the reality is a lot of us are not. We're on teams that drain us, that don't always get along, that jump on Zoom calls that probably could have been an email. We're on teams that leave us at the end of the day frustrated and a little burned out. And when you're leading a team that doesn't just share the same office, doesn't even share the same country, but is a geographically dispersed multicultural team, the opportunities for conflict, for frustration, they just magnify. Now, as a leader, if you're leading a multicultural team, you probably figured out already that it's not just about managing projects, it's also about managing people. People who see the world and your Zoom calls very, very differently. And this is where cultural intelligence comes in. Want to know more? Stay tuned. If you're new to the channel, my name is David Burkus, and I study high-performing teams and work with leaders to build their best team ever. Work dynamics are constantly changing, and teams are constantly being more and more global. So if this is the type of information you need to take your team to the next level, then subscribe to the channel, or better yet, join our email newsletter community, link in the video description below. All right, let's get into it. Most leadership advice out there is built on Western ideals. Autonomy, authenticity, egalitarianism. But the reality is that 70% of the world's workforce is from a more collectivist and hierarchical culture. And that mismatch leads to a lot of frustrations, miscommunications, broken trust, and eventually underperformance. And for leaders, that's where that sense of cultural intelligence comes in. David Livermore, a social scientist and leading expert on cultural intelligence, someone I've learned an awful lot from, defines cultural intelligence as a leader's ability to understand different cultural norms, to expand their own capacity to reflect and learn from them, and also to adjust their behavior to collaborate with those differences in a more effective way. Most people tend to overcorrect or oversimplify when it comes to cultural differences on a team. They think, oh, let's throw a meeting, let's learn a few cultural facts about each other, let's always avoid conflict, and then, we'll just let people be people. But too much emphasis on differences and an emphasis on avoiding conflict or building psychological safety without cultural nuance can actually backfire. Your problem is, I want everyone to get along. I want people to be happy. I don't want them to offend anyone. I want them to get their work done. I get it. Those are great goals. But just sending out a link to an article or a video to watch, even this video, is not going to build cultural intelligence magically like that. It takes time. But this video, at least, can get you started. Most leaders, especially those from traditionally Western backgrounds, take an approach to leading global teams that's not wrong. It's just that what needs to be is different than a traditional Western approach. It's more nuanced. And because of that nuance, a lot of leaders can fall into the same common traps. We all want autonomy, right? We want our people to feel empowered, right? Well, not necessarily. It's incredibly tempting for Western leaders to assume that what people want is total control over how they do their work and how they make their decisions. But most of the global workforce from a more collectivist background might be totally disoriented or disengaged by that approach. They might be left wondering why they're left to make the decisions, distrustful of a leader that's not making those decisions. They want clear processes, and they want leaders to consider the needs of everyone and make decisions for them on behalf of the team. Here's a thought-provoking and, to me, kind of funny example. When McDonald's was scaling operations in India, they copied a lot of processes and procedures from their American manuals, one of which was their employee recognition program. We've all seen these, the Employee of the Month. But it failed spectacularly because being singled out as the Employee of the Month was also seen to the rest of the team as being singled out for undermining the team. They wanted to work collectively. Now, the company made a quick pivot here, and it made all the difference. They shifted from Employee of the Month to Team of the Month, The recognition concept was still the same and still became a powerful motivator, but removing that individualism had a whole lot more success. Now let's talk about one of my favorite topics, psychological safety. To a Westerner, psychological safety means that teams feel safe to speak up when they disagree, to share new ideas that might conflict with the rest of the team. And to be candid, that's true and that needs to be there in just about every culture. But the tactics, the way you play out psychological safety can be very, very different. Because to a Westerner, it sounds like I'm inviting teams into constant conflict. But to other cultures that prioritize de-escalating conflict and even saving face, those same tactics aren't really welcomed. Google was an early adopter and really one of the famous pioneers of psychological safety in the workplace. And so as they spread throughout the globe, they tried to roll out the same psychological safety manual everywhere. But it turned out that in some cultures, emphasizing inclusion and safety had the negative effect of undermining intellectual honesty. Again, it's not that psychological safety isn't important, it's just that some cultures are going to disagree a little bit differently. Heck, I realized this on my own. It took me multiple different trips to China to realize that when clients I was working with, or even just people I was going to eat a meal with, when they said things like, "It will be very hard to do that," they were actually saying no. As an American, if I say it'll be very hard to do that, I'm saying, give me some credit for how hard I'm trying. But they were telling me no in their own way. So how do we, or Google, create psychological safety on these culturally diverse teams? Well, for a lot of them, it's about co-creating norms, working together to shape the ways in which we're going to have open discussion and intellectual honesty. And as a leader, it's a little bit about how we frame questions. If we know that we can't rely on everyone to just speak up whenever they disagree, we might have to use questions that call for candor a little bit more. So for example, we might shift from a closed-end question like, are we missing anything? Which makes it really easy to just say no and move on, to, hey, what are we missing? Which is an invitation to speak up if you see anything differently or anything about this situation that hasn't been spoken yet. Finally, let's talk about transparency. Leaders in the West are often told to be radically transparent, to be authentic leaders. When something goes wrong, own your mistakes and communicate it to the whole company. And look, I subscribe to that philosophy. But when you're talking about a multicultural team, you've got to take into account that in a lot of other cultures where face saving is a priority, where teams are much more hierarchical, the idea of a leader just groveling and talking about all the ways they've disappointed the company, that's not going to go over the way you think. Instead, most of those cultures would prefer, they know that something went wrong, but they would prefer the leader to handle it a bit more quietly and to use their actions to rebuild trust in their credibility and not just their words. So don't confuse bluntness with clarity. You're gonna need to experiment here and gauge your team's receptiveness to your honest communication and adjust your communication style along the way. This is gonna take a little bit of time. That's okay. So now we built a more culturally intelligent leader, let's talk about building cultural intelligence across the whole team. There's a few common traps that diverse multicultural teams tend to fall into. Here's the top 4, just to name a few. Direct versus indirect communication. For a Westerner, for an American like me, a lot of communication is explicit. We say exactly what we're thinking. But in a lot of more indirect cultures, there's an awful lot of meaning embedded in just a few words. Trouble with accents or fluency. English is very quickly becoming the language of business, if it's not there already, but non-native speakers may struggle with fluency, may have trouble getting their ideas across a thick accent, and that can lead to perceptions of people being less intelligent and less of a high performer than they really are. Differing attitudes towards hierarchy. The teams that are often flat and egalitarian might actually be uncomfortable for people from more culturally hierarchical countries. They might defer to higher status team members at the risk of being seen as someone who's not contributing as much as everybody else. Conflicting decision-making norms. Some cultures prize making quick decisions, and others want the decision to go round and round through all of the various stakeholders until collectively we're in consensus about what we should do. And that can get very, very frustrating to the ones who just want a quick decision. One of my favorite frameworks for navigating these barriers is the split method, developed by Tsedal Neeley, a brilliant professor, an amazing author, and really an expert in international leadership. Each part of the framework, structure, process, language, identity, technology, offers a chance for the team to connect and to cut down on dysfunction before it starts. Structure is about more than just the org chart. It's about perceived power. If you've got a team of people, some of whom from New York and some from Singapore, but the company's headquarters are in New York, I can guarantee you parts of that team feel like those in New York have a bit more power. And if that's not what you want, then you need to be clear about that as a leader, emphasizing that we are all a team of equals. Or as one leader Neeley studied put it, we are different, yet one. That's the mentality we're going for. Process is about how we build norms as a team that create empathy and connection. And this can be as small as making it a rule that we spend the first 5 minutes of any virtual meeting catching up and getting to know more about each other, or it can be as large as making sure we have systems in place to hear from everyone, like newer members of the team or those who may not be fluent in the language who are hesitant to speak up. We have them go first. One team I worked with even had the rule that if you disagree, you go to the front of the line when it comes to questions. That makes it much more likely we get everybody's voice out there. It's a great norm to have. Identity is about staying curious on these cultural differences. Don't assume that just because you read one book or watched one video, even this video, you're an expert in someone else's culture. They're the expert. What they need from a leader is someone who's willing to keep learning, to keep asking questions, and to keep providing opportunities for people to share about their cultural identity so that the whole team better understands it. Technology is your toolkit. It's about what tool we're going to use for what communication. You need to make a decision fast, jump on a live call, and talk it out. You need to just present information. Well, you probably don't need everyone there synchronously. An email will do. Whatever the rules of the road for using those tools are, make sure you're modeling them as well. Whether that means having your camera on because you want everyone else's camera on, or whether that means respecting after hours and not sending emails just because it's convenient to you. It's about setting the right tools for the job and maintaining that we use the same tools in the same way. You put all this together and Split becomes more than a simple framework. It's a way for leaders to lead with intention and empathy, and a way to turn cultural complexities into a competitive edge. Now, as you're building this collective understanding of each other across all these cultures, you're also going to want to make sure that trust is growing as well. So you're going to check out this video here on the trust loop, how trust and psychological safety grows across teams, any kind of teams.